So you've been hearing a lot about investment trends and real estate. Well, it keeps coming up, doesn't it?
It really does. And it can feel like trying to figure out some kind of secret language sometimes.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we're looking at something called negative gearing. It's a strategy some property investors use.
Right. And we're basing this on an article from a licensed realtor down in Richmond, Virginia, who gives a pretty good overview.
Our mission here is just to make it clear, what negative gearing is, how it works, and maybe why investors might even consider it.
Yeah, without getting bogged down in like super complex financial stuff. Keep it understandable.
Okay, let's dive in. The article kicks off by noting something I think we've both observed.
Uh-huh.
More people seem to be buying investment properties recently.
Definitely. And the realtor points to a couple of things, like maybe the pandemic shaking loose more distressed or probate
Great
properties.
opportunities there. And also the fact we just came out of a really hot seller's market.
Yeah, maybe tempting some people to sell quickly if prices were high. That makes sense.
So to get negative gearing, we first need gearing, right? What's the simple version?
Gearing is just, well, borrowing money to buy an asset, using leverage, basically.
Got it. Borrowing to invest.
Exactly. Now, negative gearing, that's when the money coming in from the property, mostly the rent, isn't actually enough to cover all the costs going out.
Costs like what specifically?
Things like the mortgage payments, upkeep, the interest on the loan is a big one, and also accounting for depreciation of, you know, the property wearing out over time.
And capital works too, like big improvements.
Yeah, that can factor in as well. So the income just doesn't cover those immediate expenses.
Okay, hang on. The rent doesn't pay the bills in the short run. That sounds, well, a bit odd. Why do that intentionally?
Okay, here's the main hook, according to this realtor. The big reason, potential tax benefits.
Tax benefits. How does that work?
Well, the article explains that if your rental property is making a loss on paper because the expenses are higher than the income, you might be able to use that loss to reduce the tax you pay on your other income.
Like your salary.
Potentially, yeah. Though the article does mention with restrictions, so it's not always straightforward. But that's the core idea. Offset other income.
Okay, so you accept a loss now, hoping for something later. The article says it's usually a long-term play.
Precisely. It's generally not a quick flip strategy. The whole thing really depends on the property itself going up in value over time. A lot.
So the thinking is you might lose a bit year to year on rent versus costs,
Uh-huh.
but you're betting that when you eventually sell, the price increase will more than make up for those losses, giving you a profit overall.
That's the gamble. It makes the strategy really sensitive to, the housing market is doing.
But the realtor highlights the risk too, obviously. It's not guaranteed money.
Not at all. That's a crucial point in the article. If the property doesn't go up in value enough, or maybe even drops
Then the strategy fails.
completely, you've been covering those extra costs all along, maybe getting some tax relief, but you don't get the big payoff at the end, you could end up losing money.
It really is a bet on the market appreciating.
Right.
What about those costs, though? What kind of deductions typically create that loss?
The article lists the usual suspects. Interest on the loan is often the biggest. Then costs for finding and managing tenants, repairs and maintenance.
Depreciation, you mentioned that, wear and tear.
Yep, depreciation, major renovations or capital works, and just general holding costs like council rates or insurance, things like that.
Okay, so all those add up, potentially pushing expenses over the rental income, creating the loss for tax purposes.
Correct.
But it all circles back to that one core idea from the realtor.
Yeah.
This entire strategy lives or dies based on the property's value increasing.
That's the takeaway. The article is clear. Negative gearing depends on market appreciation to be successful as an investment strategy. Without that capital growth, the tax benefits likely won't cover the actual cash losses over time.
Right, so let's recap quickly. Negative gearing. Investors intentionally run a rental property where expenses are higher than income, at least initially. Main reason. Potential tax advantages, using the loss to offset other taxable income. But it's a long game, and it's fundamentally reliant on the hope, the expectation that the property's value will rise significantly, allowing a profitable sale down the track.
You nailed it. And that brings us to a good thought for listeners, maybe.
Yeah.
When you look at any investment, especially one like this with tax implications, you really have to weigh those potential benefits against the very real risks.
But being totally dependent on the market going your way.
Exactly. And also how it fits with your own personal financial situation and like your tolerance for that kind of risk. It's not a one-size-fits-all strategy.